Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian, and today we're going to be starting a multi-part series on the channel on how to play Mr. Mime specifically. Now, the reason I'm doing this, I'm not just releasing like an hour-long video, is strictly because of that. I don't want to make an hour-long video going over how to play Mr. Mime. I think it's a lot easier for you guys and me as well if I just make this part of like a shorter videos. They can kind of reference to each other whenever you need help. All right, so today's video is going to be strictly going over the best map spots in the game that you can abuse as Mr. Mime with your confusion and your barriers. All right, and we'll go over them separately so it's not too confusing. In case you don't know who I am a Masters player. I'm in Masters rank. I pretty much more or less one-tricked Mr. Mime all the way up to Masters. He's my main. He's by far my best Pokemon. I play a bunch of other Pokemon too, mostly supports, but in a bit of tank here and there, one or two attackers, but mostly supports, primarily Mr. Mime. So we're going to be making a few videos regarding how to play him specifically, because there's a bit of nuance and intricacies that you have to know when playing this guy, just because there's so many Pokemon out there with different CC, a lot of range moves, a lot of things that you have to kind of look out for when playing him. So we'll be covering that as these videos come along. So as for today, though, we're going to be mostly just covering map spots, the best map spots you can use. I'm in the practice range right now just to kind of illustrate this a lot easier for you guys. So I'm going to tell you guys right now, but Mr. Mime's best lane is always the bottom lane. All right, and I can show you guys this pretty quickly. All right, the main reason why the bottom lane is Mr. Mime's like happy place compared to the top lane is strictly because of all these walls. You see all these walls that are right here? Okay, as well as the walls that are down here. These are going to be your best friend. The reason for this is strictly because of the fact that for Mr. Mime, confusion is pretty much your primary source of damage output. Sure, you can do basic attacks, but realistically, you don't really want to be within melee distance of somebody unless you've already stunned them with your confusion and done damage, and put them in a position where they kind of have to run away in order to not get killed. That's the only time you ever want to get within melee distance. Otherwise, your primary initiation tool is going to be with confusion. One of the biggest things that you guys should probably try and get used to doing is I'll see a lot of Mr. Mimes. They'll try and they'll try and start off with the wall. Everyone knows about the wall, the wombo combo, the wall into confusion combo. Everybody knows this, okay? The biggest problem with this though is that most players will always try and initiate with the wall first when that's not what you want to do. All right, especially as you start climbing into like high veteran, in ultra, and obviously masters, people are expecting the wall. Okay, as soon as they see the wall pop up, they're either gonna blink away with an eject button. If they have movement abilities like, I don't know, Absol or something, or Talonflame, they're just gonna pop out of the way, dash out of the way real quick to avoid getting hit with the confusion afterwards. So more often than not, your best bet is to actually just start off with confusion itself instead of initiating with the wall. All right, and the best way to do this is to actually have confusion at an angle, okay, pointing at whatever wall is near you and near the enemy at all times. That's usually the best way, and this is the primary reason why the bottom lane is just strictly better than the top lane for Mr. Mime, so you just always want to go bottom lane. It's strictly because there's more walls that you can utilize in this area compared to top lane. Like, you see how many we have? We have this wall, we have this wall, this wall, this wall, that wall, that wall. There's always a wall within confusion distance at all times, and that's like your holy playground. If I were to take a look at the top lane, for instance, just to kind of show you guys the difference, when you come to the top lane, there's not nearly as many walls for you to utilize. Okay, you have these, and it's worth noting too that this gap right here, the one in the middle, it is much bigger compared to the gap in the bottom lane, where Dreadnought is. Okay, so it makes it a lot harder to actually hit people into walls, and this space right here is also a lot wider compared to the bottom one. So strictly because there's more walls down below, there's tighter spaces in between each wall. It makes it a lot easier to actually shove people into walls using the confusion to get not only that bonus damage but also the CC stun effect. So whenever you're playing in these areas, you just want to get into the habit of pointing confusion into the walls. It's worth noting too that you don't have to hit confusion straight on at the wall in order to get them stunned. You can still point confusion at an angle to get the stun effect. They'll still ram into the wall to get it. So like oftentimes if you're at your own goal right here, for example, sometimes you might have a couple enemies that are like right here, okay, waiting for you to either come out, maybe deciding if they're going to initiate or not. They're kind of, you know, dirtling in this area. So a lot of times you can actually kind of dirtle in your own goalpost, kind of have it pre-initiated pointing at the closest wall to the enemy and just move up slightly and slam him right into it. Okay, that is easily one of the best ways you can get easy damage in and easy stuns, which can even potentially set up for kills for your teammate. Even if it doesn't set up for a kill, at the very least it's likely to make them waste their eject button or whatever battle item they have, in which case you're making them waste of resources, which is a good thing for you guys. Another good spot that you want to get used to is hiding in the grass. Hiding the grass is always going to be your best friend with Mr. Mime. Because of the fact that, like I said before, everyone's kind of expecting the wombo combo with confusion and barrier, or at least confusion from Mr. Mime. Okay, people are usually going to end up trying to keep their distance away from you as often as possible. So anytime you're able to hide in the grass, you want to do so because it's easier to catch people off guard. So like, for example, if I'm hiding in this grass, okay, sometimes the enemy will just come across from their goalpost, maybe thinking there's no one nearby, and they might try and score in my goal. In which case, with them not knowing I'm here, I can easily just ram him into that wall. Now, on another note, in this bottom lane in particular, you see how like towards the Dreadnought half of this bottom lane, there's these two lanes, the one I'm staying in, that one to the right, and then there's these two patches of grass. Okay. It's worth noting that if you stand in this top patch of grass, you can, anybody who's in that bottom patch of grass right below me, you can slam him right into that wall. So oftentimes, especially during the Dreadnought fights, I get people all the time with this because they're just not expecting it. A lot of times when people are fighting in Dreadnought, okay, for those team fights, okay, they might come over here, they might dirtle around, fight some of your teammates, in which case you can just kind of come here and you can slam him right into the wall. It's easy damage, easy stuns. No one ever expects it. Now, in terms of the actual Dreadnought fight, it's also worth noting that you can, it doesn't show it, but there's an invisible wall right here as well. Oftentimes, because of the fact that people are fighting in Dreadnought will appear like right here typically. A lot of enemies will often come into this area. When they do, you can slam them into this wall very easily. Okay. If you put up a wall to kind of cut off their escape route, they're forced to go here right next to the wall, which sets up for an easy slam to here. Let me put it back up. Okay. Or they have to come here, in which case it sets up for an easy slam into the invisible barrier, the invisible wall that's here too. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the Dreadnought fights, all right? When your team is fighting at Dreadnought versus the enemy team, all right, your job as Mr. Mime is to defend your team from any oncoming enemies and prevent the enemy for as long as possible from approaching Dreadnought. Give your team enough time to kill the Dreadnought before the enemy team can try and come in and snipe it. All right, that is your job as Mr. Mime. You'll notice that a lot of Mr. Mime's roles in this game, as you watch my videos, are pretty much almost very similar, if not exactly the same, to what a defender's role is in this game, which is oftentimes to protect their teammates and help initiate and create opportunities for teammates to get kills. All right. And Mr. Mime is honestly a fantastic Pokemon to do this, just because of the fact he has a lot of keep away tools. Now, let's get back on topic. In regards to the Dreadnought fights, like I said before, your mission is to play keep away from the enemy team as much as possible to buy your team time to kill Dreadnought so the enemy team can't snipe it away from your team. That's your job. That's your goal. You don't have to get kills. You just have to stall them for as long as possible. So with that in mind, let's say that your team ends up winning the Dreadnought fight. Okay, if that's the case, my favorite spot to stand in for Mr. Mime is usually in this bottom area right here. Because typically what ends up happening is that as the enemy team comes back from like spawn or something, all right, they're usually going to come down here and try and get Dreadnought. Which makes sense, right? It's the shortest route to Dreadnought from the goal post and Dreadnought. So typically could come down here. So in which case, you want to be positioned either in this grass where they can't see you and you can kind of surprise them, or just hovering right down below, directly in between them and getting in their way. As they approach, you can put up a wall to get in their way. Literally make it impossible for them to get through. And then if they ever just walk around your wall, okay, if they walk around your wall like right here, you can just shove them away, and then you can put up another wall. All right. If you need to, do not be afraid to solo ult people as they come by. If you have your Unite move, that means. All right. The main reason being that Mr. Mime has the fastest charging Unite move in the entire game. You get your Unite move like this. You get it super fast. So it's okay if you end up, quote unquote, wasting it if it means helping out your team and keeping yourself alive. All right. Mr. Mime's Unite move applies 3 stuns to any enemies caught within the radius. So it is also another useful tool for playing that keep away shenanigans. All right. If they're coming down that top post, you can put a wall. If they walk around it, then you can shove them out of the way. All right. You can put up another wall to keep them out. Maybe if you got confusion back in time, you can shove them away again. You can keep repeating the process. If you don't have your cooldowns back in time, though, by the time they get past, then you can ult on top of them to kind of stun them. Okay, kind of keep them in bay. And then by the end of the duration of the Unite move, all right, by the time this ends, you can typically put up another wall and put up confusion again. All right, you'll have your cooldowns back by the time it ends, most often. Mr. Mime's fantastic at playing keep away, so that's your job. I'm not a big fan of hiding in the grass right here. So let's say this goalpost right here is destroyed. It's completely destroyed, and enemy team's trying to come back from their innermost goalpost. I'm not a big fan of standing in this grass waiting for them, just because the fact that it allows for so much leeway for them to get around you. Your walls aren't really gonna block a whole lot of room. You typically want to use your walls at any sort of choke points that makes it super hard or almost impossible for the enemy team to get past it without using some sort of movement ability or a battle item. Okay, so in this instance, if this goalpost is completely destroyed, more often than not, if you want to play more up, like play a little bit forward up, it's a lot better to actually stand within their like little tunnel area to put up walls instead. Because it takes up more space. That's the thing. Okay, that wall takes up more space than putting a wall up right here, for example, where they can easily just walk around it with no effort whatsoever. If you put it right here, they have to walk at the sides, which sets you up for confusions into like these walls, for example. All right, and this same tactic applies for pretty much anywhere else on the map. Your walls are best used for spots where it's very closely knit, very tight spaces compared to anywhere else. That's why the Dreadnought area is a lot better compared to the top lane, specifically because of this reason and because there's more walls. Your walls right here do block pretty much the entirety of this entire Dreadnought lane too, which is worth noting. All right. Now, let's say during the Dreadnought fight, okay, it's kind of back and forth. No one seems to be having quite the edge just yet. In which case, one of the best ways that you can easily utilize walls is this middle lane right here. Okay, this is typically where most of the fights will occur in Dreadnought. People hiding in grass, popping out of grass the whole time, kind of testing the waters, getting little pokes in here and there. All right, this is where you can set up your traps as Mr. Mime. All right. You can either set up traps or protect your team effectively with your barriers. It depends on positioning, but if the enemy team is on this side, okay, and your team is on this side, a lot of times you can actually walk up, put a barrier right behind them, preventing their escape. I can walk through my walls, but you can prevent their escape and oftentimes set up for easy confusion hits. Okay, these walls alone easily set up for easy kills for you and your teammates who kind of notice that, hey, they're walled off, they can't walk away, and you can just kind of gang up on whoever's down there. The same thing can also be applied vice versa. Let's say the enemy team is applying pressure to your team, in which case you can actually put a wall up right here, and now they can't walk this way, they can't chase you guys, and your team is able to freely pull back and go back to the goalpost for heals. All right, it's very simple, but those two spots alone, this entire middle section, this is like your playground, because not only in total can you put walls here to protect your team, let them enough time to run away and get healed, you can also apply it here to kind of trap who's ever in here, push them into it, kind of keep them trapped in this area. If you can hide in the grass, you can hide in the grass to kind of surprise anybody you notice that's walking down here and shove them into that. People have a false sense of security when playing against a Mr. Mime, because they often think that, like, oh, hey, if he doesn't have his barriers, I'm safe. Okay, because they think that you have to have your barriers in order to do the bonus damage and stun from confusion, when then that's not the case. You can just shove them into a normal wall. So a lot of times people have a false sense of security when just walking into a grass like this, in which case if you're at your goalpost and you see someone like walking down there, you can just go here and go boom, easy damage. Okay, same thing for this one, boom. All right, now that is more or less it for the Dreadnought fights. Now, what do you do in the situation that you win or lose the Dreadnought fight? Okay, well, and this is also going to apply for Rotom too, or Rotom, however you pronounce it. It's the same thing on both top and bottom lane. All right, let's say that your team ends up losing the Dreadnought fight or Rotom fight. Okay, the best thing that you can do is oftentimes the enemy team will end up going for a mass push towards your goalpost and try and all score at once on your goalpost. That will often end up being the thing. The best thing that you can do as Mr. Mime is actually put up walls directly right next to your goalpost. The main reason for doing this is that it prevents the enemy team from getting into the position that they want to be able to dunk safely without being pressured. Yeah, just dunk safely without being pressured. So if you put a wall directly on top of it, it makes it really hard for them to do so. They can't get close enough where they can like barely score. Again, your job as Mr. Mime is primarily to play keep away. In this instance, if your team loses the Dreadnought fight, more often than not, most of your team is going to be dead and are going to take a few seconds for them to respawn and get back to this goalpost to actually help you out. All right, in which case your primary objective is to just stall for as long as possible until your teammates can come back and help out. And this is why the barriers right here, right on top of your goalposts, are so useful, because it makes it harder for the enemy team to actually get those safe goals in. They can't bully you as much. Now, a cool little technique that I like to do oftentimes is I actually put like barriers right next to each other. So if I do that, I'll put like another one here. It makes it impossible for enemy teams to directly approach from the front, in which case they have to go all the way around the goalpost just to score, or they either have to waste their eject button or some sort of movement ability just to get past your barriers. In which case, that's what you want, because if they end up getting past your barrier, okay, that means you can just slam them into your own barrier with confusion. It's free damage, it's a stun, you can stall them. Same thing applies with your Unite move, like I mentioned as well. All right, got the walls up, you can slam them. Okay, they're still getting past. Okay, I can ult on top of them. They can't score. In which case, I should have at least one wall and confusion back by that time. I can do it again. Just keep delaying them. Just keep delaying them as much as possible. And then hopefully, by this time, you should have at least one or two teammates back to help you out. All right. This is how you stall a goalpost and try and protect it for as long as possible. Same thing applies on the top lane as well. It's the same concept. It might be slightly different in terms of map positioning, but it's the same concept. Now, what do you do if your team ends up winning the Rotom or Dreadnought fight? Okay, typically most of their team's going to be dead, and your team's going to be pushing their goalposts, trying to, you know, take out the goalposts essentially. In which case, what you do, there's a couple of things that you do. All right, if there's still a few stragglers left and they're fighting it out on the goalpost, one of the easiest things that you can do, just place a barrier either in the middle of the goalpost, or you can put it behind the goalpost. All right, this does two things. If you place the barrier in the middle of the goalpost, what this ends up doing is that any enemies that are on the goalpost, all right, they can't walk past it. If they're not ranged Pokemon like a Pikachu or something, let's say it's like a Machamp, for example, or an Absol, or Zeraora. Okay, someone who relies on physical melee ranged attacks. Because they can't walk through the barrier, it gives your team essentially almost like a semi-safe space to go for a goal right here. Let me go ahead and turn on the wild Pokemon so I can just kind of like show that, for example. Let me take these guys out. Okay, so that guy's taken out. All right, so if I put a wall right here, this spot becomes, in a way, this half of the goalpost becomes semi-safe. Because it makes it harder for the enemy team to actually like stop you physically. Now, let's say your team is pushing and the enemy is like walking backwards, trying not to get killed, but they're still trying to like do their best to stop you from scoring. Like, let's say it's a ranged Pokemon, like Pikachu, for example. All right, Pikachu might end up over in this side. He might be like pew pew pew, oh, Thundershock, oh, blah blah blah. Okay. In which case, oftentimes you can just put a barrier right next to the goalpost so no one else can really approach, and your team can kind of just score on the edge of the goalpost. Or you can go offensive. Okay, and either slam for the goal, in which case, either the Pikachu or whoever it is going to end up running away so that because they see it coming and they don't want to get hit by it. Or in which case, if they do, now you got a barrier in their face and they can't approach your team's the goalpost anymore to defend it, and your team can score safely. Or they do get hit by the Wombo Combo, okay, in which case you can just bully whoever's left there and let your team score. It's a win-win situation. All right. These are more or less the fundamentals of how you kind of, how should I say, assert your dominance, T-pose on them, dab, whatever, as Mr. Mime in these various situations. And they're more often than not going to revolve in the bottom lane, not only because it's just strictly the best lane for Mr. Mime's walls and confusion, but it's also the easiest to get value out of in terms of positionings, in terms of the walls and whatnot on goalposts. Now, let's just cover the top lane real quick because it's pretty much almost exactly the same. There's just less space for you to take advantage of compared to the bottom lane. So in the top lane, a lot of the concepts still apply. It's just not as effective. Just because there's way more open space compared to the bottom lane. So you still want to initiate with the confusion, slam them into the walls. Unfortunately, you can't hide into the grass and slam people into the wall like you could in the bottom lane, which is kind of partially why this lane's not as good for Mr. Mime. I'm not joking when I say that if you're playing Mr. Mime and you have... I don't care if the whole team wants to go bottom at the beginning of the game, you have to go bottom as Mr. Mime. If you go top as Mr. Mime, you're just not going to do as much value. I'm sorry, but I would much rather have the whole team go bottom if I'm playing Mr. Mime compared to me going top with somebody else and two other people going bottom. I will force it. I will force someone else to decide to go top if I have to. I don't care. It's just not as good. Anyways, yeah, you want to continue to initiate the confusions like usual. All right, it's a lot harder to get the wombo combos off. You can kind of do it in this middle section right here sometimes, but it's not as effective. All right, now in terms of your job, just like with Dreadnought, your job as Mr. Mime during the Rotom fights Leave me alone, Blastoise. Leave me alone. Okay, your job is to keep people at bay. Maybe I can even do it with the Blastoise here. The Rotom's gonna be right here when it spawns, in which case you can oftentimes stand in this grass. If the goalpost is right here, you can often stand in the grass. Or if the goalpost is gone and you're feeling risky, you can stand in their lane, kind of like you did at the bottom, and just prevent them from coming for as long as possible. Okay. Your job is the exact same. It's a little harder in the top lane just because there's so much more open space compared to bottom lane, but your job is still the same. You still gotta do it the same way. Now, let's go ahead and cover the Zapdos fights. The Zapdos fights are a little back and forth. It's a little iffy, and it just completely kind of depends on where you and your teammates and the enemy team are kind of positioned. If you happen to get into the Zapdos area, the arena, whatever, before the enemy team, oftentimes you want to start setting up in one of these lanes. Mr. Mime's barrier can completely wall off this entire middle section. At lower ranks and like veteran and below, you'll typically see, oh dang, my hand was off the controller. You'll typically see enemies go through this middle lane. Stop hitting me with that. In which case you can oftentimes just block them off with the barrier. See that? He can't walk through it. Your barrier literally blocks the whole thing. It also sets up for really good wombo combos. Because let's say they do happen to slip past. Maybe there was a crack in the corner of the barrier or something. You can just follow up with confusion. Okay. Often than not, you'll have 2 or 3 barriers in reserve that you can use. So oftentimes you can just go boom, wait a little bit, kind of like taunt them a little bit, and then towards them push them back. Okay, put up another barrier, wait for your confusion to come back. Boop. Put up another barrier.
5,
and literally
4,
just mess with them.
3, 2,
if you have your night move, you can use that to stall as well.
Time's up.
This middle section is the best spot to just stall as Mr. Mime during the Zapdos fights. The longer that you can prevent the enemy team from hitting the Zapdos, the better off you'll be. Now, if you happen to be an Ultra or in Masters, okay, typically people at these ranks will start avoiding going down the middle lane. Not really go down the middle lane anymore. Okay, sometimes they might, but for the most part, they would just completely avoid the middle lane entirely. And most people will typically opt to go either go to Zapdos either through the bottom lane or the top lane, okay? In which case, if you're playing Mr. Mime at these ranks, you're better off just blocking off either the top or bottom lane instead, okay? Just watch out for it, because that's more likely where people are going to come from. This area with all these walls right here, this is also kind of your best friend for the Zapdos area. Because if the enemy is trying to come down here and they see you, I wouldn't say they're stuck, but they're forced into decision. Do they try and force their way through? Or do they just fight me? In which case, that's what I want. I want to keep them away for as long as possible. Because if the enemy walks down here, so let's say I'm the enemy and I'm walking through this grass. If you see them walking through the grass, you can literally just use confusion and just smack them into the wall. They will literally smack into the wall no matter where they're standing in this area. Same thing for this side, okay? And the layout's the same exact way on the bottom half of Zapdos too. You can oftentimes just slam them into the wall. If they come towards the middle, you can kind of do what I was doing at the goalpost tunnels. You can just put a wall kind of in the middle, in which case they're forced to go around the corners, and you can slam them into a wall. It stalls them, keeps them away for as long as possible. If you need to, again, ult on them, to stall them. You have a lot of options. But yeah, that is more or less today's video, guys. These are some of the best spots and situations to use your barriers and confusion. Go ahead and let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. I've been making quite a few more guides for Mr. Mime. Just like I said before, this is a multi-part video essentially, just because I didn't want to do everything in just one video. So keep an eye out for that if you're looking forward to it. I'm also thinking about doing videos like this for other Pokemon too. If you have any in particular that you're interested, let me know in the comment section down below. Other than that, though, if you enjoyed the video, please give the video a like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell button. Anything to help boost the YouTube algorithm, I would really appreciate it. We also have a Discord in case anybody would like to join. I oftentimes play with a lot of people in the Discord. Link is in the description below. I also stream on Twitch pretty often too. So if you maybe want to see some Mr. Mime in action or any other Pokemon, check me out on Twitch. Link also in the description down below. But other than that, hope you guys have a good one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.